So I had a little thing, prepared that I wanted to talk about initially, but you did bring up what's happening with Canada and India right now.
We have to touch on it.
Do we have to touch on it?
We have to, because I think it's dharmic.
It is dharmic, actually, right?
Yeah,
We're having a bit of a dharma yuddha spilling over into North America now, although I don't even consider it that, right? We've got, Canada, India has just withdrawn the High Commissioner from Canada over allegations. They didn't just say that the Indian government might be involved now. They said Ajit Doval was directly involved in this assassination on this big-tittied Khalistani guy named Nijar. And then they said Amit Shah, the home minister, was directly involved. That's an insane accusation, dude. That's such an insane accusation. And I'm trying to figure out, well, what is Justin Trudeau's end game here, right? Because there's not enough Sikhs or Khalistanis in Canada to really help him win his next election necessarily, right? I mean, I'm not that up to date on what the actual electoral politics of Canada are actually like, and nor do I care, actually. So I'm just wondering, what is the pandering about, right? What is this about? And my suspicion, I want to hear what you have to say about this, Adi, is I think Canada is just acting as a cutout for the United States, because the United States doesn't want to have a head-on, full-on diplomatic confrontation with India yet. But we do know that the Americans were exposed recently for the so-called students' protest in Bangladesh, which did turn out to be basically a CIA op, a National Endowment for Democracy op, which everybody knows is a cutout for the CIA, established by William Casey in the 80s. That was the former director of the CIA, right? And everything about that story was, it was all an op. It was per Muhammad Yunus's own words, a designed protest movement, right? Designed revolution, and which was ultimately just a military coup of Sheikh Hasina, right? That was exposed, and I'm wondering now if this is them, the Americans, kind of upping the ante against India right now. But I'm it's hard for me to see the end game. What do they want? Rahul Gandhi, the Justin Trudeau of India, to come into power, and then what, right? They're going to somehow support the Ukraine effort, stop buying Russian oil. What is it,
Yeah, here's my thing. I don't really doubt that India has meddled in Canadian stuff.
It's the same.
Yeah, I think there's probably a fair amount of empirical evidence to that. I'm not going to speak to it. I'm just not denying it.
The killers were driving a silver Toyota Camry.
Oh, so it wasn't a Tata Sumo?
It was a Toyota Camry, which for in America, that's an Indian. Okay,
it's a Maruti.
That's an Indian. You know what I mean?
I think India is. Every day we all get older, India has an even firmer plant on the world stage.
Yes.
India is so strong. I recommend anyone who's just interested, go listen to John Mearsheimer and Jeffrey Sachs talk about India. I think it was at that podcast, All In. Their summit.
Okay, this is pretty recent. Yeah.
Yeah, they had them speak, and there's a clip out there.
And this is what I see is happening. India is now no longer a kind of state that is completely run by a comprador class of kind of brown Englishmen, right? Which is what it's been through the kind of whole Nehruvian era. Mimic men, right? As Naipaul would say, right? Now you have the BJP in there. You have the son of a chaiwala, proud Hindu who's in there, and India is now asserting itself as a civilizational force, right? Which is not describing India's history as beginning in 1947, but India's history is something which is thousands of years old, right? Yeah. And it is asserting itself as a civilizational state. And look, let's be honest, the United States does not want a multipolar world, right? We see that in all of their actions against the Russians and so on and so forth, right? They want a unipolar world. So the more that India goes, pardon the expression, off the reservation, different Indians, the more uncomfortable and discomfited the United States is by that. They didn't like the fact that India is well, we're going to buy oil from the Russians. We don't have to do what you say. We have our own interests and our own national interests, and we're going to pursue those, right?
And we always have. Since 47.
We've always been non-aligned, actually. That's the thing.
Since we've become an independent
India's
country,
always been somewhat...
It's actually kind of why we're suddenly positioned for such great success.
I think you might be right about that, actually. You are right about that. And I don't want to go too into the actual in specific history of India, right, or the modern state of India.
I think the main point is that the Western world, the big countries, are learning that they've been fucking around all over the world doing all sorts of interventionist things. Yeah. And it is a shock to see a country that's not just a random country too. India is a superpower. Yes. It always has been.
Yes.
Right? It's a shock for them to see India starting to say hello.
Yeah, and it's inherently like kind of a racist thing where they're like, well, they can't act like this. Only we have the privilege to do transnational assassinations. You know what I mean? That's only something we can do, you know? Assassinations for me, not for thee, right? Now, look, here's the other thing, though, about the Canada thing. They haven't really even put forth the evidence that the Indians have been requesting. They haven't even put forth the evidence to say, like, hey, what is it? Show us the links, They haven't done that either, right? But I think to a larger point, I think what we're seeing here in terms of this kind of geopolitical game that's playing out right now vis-a-vis Canada as the cutout of the U.S. In opposition to India is, I think this whole kind of boogeyman of Hindutva in general is very much something that is, it's a sort of I'm not saying it's manufactured. Hindutva is a real thing, right? But this whole thing of Hindu supremacy and Hindu fascism is something that to me is completely manufactured by the West in response to a rising India, right? And not just a rising India, but an India that has a sense of itself for what it is, which is a civilizational state, right? Not just a modern nation state that's founded on secular liberal values, right? In the Constitution. No, they're like, no, we are Indians. This is what being Indic is about. And we are asserting ourselves in a nationalistic way, right? And I think this is also part of it. I think all the hue and cry over Hindutva and Hindu supremacy and stuff is really just about Western squeamishness over India asserting itself as a sovereign independent force in the world. And that is my long and short take on this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying it's right for the Indian government to go and do assassinations here, there, anywhere else, right? But like, let's just be real. This is the game. This is real politic. This is what it's about.